All right, hello and welcome to part one, where we are going to be talking about some of the basic buttons within RStudio and the basic terminal commands that those buttons are associated with that allow you to interact with a Git repository. Unfortunately, I can't get the VPN to stabilize on me, so I have to leave Jupyter Hub out of this for now. But I would like to say that all of the terminal commands that you have at your disposal can also be used from within RStudio and Jupyter Hub via their terminal interface. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to go to GitHub. And you should have an account in GitHub at this point. If not, it's super easy to sign up. And from there, send an email to get access to the mixtures repository over here. And this is some fun stuff in GitHub that we will talk about later. From there, you'll want to make a fork of this repository for your own account. It's a separate copy that's linked inside of GitHub. So we'll go ahead and click fork, and this will create a new version for us to work with. Now, let's pop over to RStudio. RStudio gives you the ability to import from GitHub easily. What you can do is go into the right-hand corner where it says Project None, and we want to create a new project. Of course, we can also we want to do check out a project from version control. I would like to note that you can create our project associated with an existing directory, and it should pick up if there's a Git repo that's already within that directory, and we'll associate it with later. But let's go ahead and try this one for now. We're checking out from a Git repository in particular, and it wants us to provide the repository URL, the project directory name, and so on. And we'll come back to this in a moment. So in order to find that URL, you click the green button over here, clone or download. And we will copy this to our clipboard. I'm paranoid, so I always like to click inside of it after I click the button and then manually Control-C it. And you will want to use the HTTPS URL in this case. If you have, or when we're within the terminal, we may wish to use the SSH link instead. Because this is a private repository, and we'll need to provide our GitHub login credentials after we've forked it into our own. So there's that, and I want to put this inside of my home directory /projects/git tutorial, and the code will appear inside of git tutorial under the directory mixtures. And I want to open a new session so I keep all of my environment variables specific to this project kind of all in one place. Now, as you can see up here, this button has actually just done the terminal command for us. Need to type in my username, type in my password. And ta-da, we've successfully cloned everything. And I'm going to go ahead and close this other window I had open. So from there, you see the normal RStudio everything. But what this has given us is a couple of new buttons. We have a Git pane over here, which provides more or less all of the buttons that we want to use. There's also another way to access the same buttons inside of the Git pane via this add-in over here. Now, from there, we should talk about branches. And what we may want to do is to create a new branch to capture some of our changes. Over here on the right hand side, you can see a list of all branches that exist or that have been merged into this main branch named master. However, what I want to do is click this button here. This little purple button will effectively copy the state of all the files in master and will create a copy of it that we can make changes to. And so this branch we're going to call get toot. And what does this let me do? Okay, I don't want that. Do I want it? Right. I'm not talking about remotes yet, so we'll go ahead and so a remote is a named idea of the upstream version of your code. And in this case, our remote named origin is the original GitHub repository that we cloned from. In particular, my username / mixtures, my own copy of the mixtures repository. And what syncing this branch with remote will do is my local copy here will go over to GitHub and say, hey, by the way, I created a new branch. So you can track changes within that branch. And that's what this means. And you can see the terminal commands here for creating new branches from within that Git repository. Git checkout -b for branch checks out a new named branch that we've called get toot. And git push -upstream to remote origin branch get toot will push changes related to a branch named get toot to whatever we've specified as the origin, and update the remote repository with our new branch, and that's considered a change. So we'll go ahead and Now our remote origin, in this case, has reported back to us that we've created a new branch. And of course, since we've synced it, branch get to is set up to track remote branch get to from our remote origin. Of course, you can now see the local branches that are here. Now, let's say I want to make some edits to a file. And I want to create a new folder, changes, and inside of that file, I want to create a new R script. Print hello GitHub. And of course, we need to actually save this file. You can do that however you like, but I want to save it under this new directory changes that I've created. And we'll name it helloworld.r. Now, if I'm keeping track, I need to add these files from within RStudio. The way to accomplish this from within the GitHub pane is to select the file that you wish to add and consider it staged over here. Now, something that we want to be careful about is to not include extraneous individual files. So for instance, I've created this mixtures project and RStudio has generated an R project for me. You can ignore these from within the .getignore file that you can find with ls-al, and ls-a shows you all files, including hidden files, and you can see getignore here. In addition to the directory that represents our Git repository, quote unquote, here, it's always called .git within the folder that you cloned into. Now from there, I might want to make sure that I update locally before I commit any changes. And so you can click pull. And it tells us that we're already up to date. But somebody might have changed something in the meantime. So it's always good practice to check first. And next, I want to commit these changes. It's beyond just adding a file, but it includes line by line and character by character differences that you can view with this diff tool here. To see what changed between iterations of commits. Commits go into a ledger that keeps track of versions for any one different file. So let's go ahead and commit. As you can see, this shows us only changes which are staged for commit. If we wanted to read the whole file, we could select unstaged, and it's not going to show it for me right now because we've selected such a small file. And we can change the context to show additional size beyond that. So the commit message is interesting. And there's, before we actually go over to the commit message, there's a couple of different neat tools that appear here. Is we can look at the history of what's occurred inside of this branch over time. And so on and so forth. In addition to giving us the first 8 characters, the first 8 characters of the SHA-1 hash, the unique identifier for each change that goes into the ledger. Of course, we're on the branch get2, and we want to make changes there. Will this show me? Oh, you can also filter by file and filter by which directory here as well, which can be important for looking at the history of several different files that more than one person may be working on, and you want to kind of keep track of where everything is. So from there, we're ready to talk about committing. And what's interesting about this is that the best practice style that's been adopted is to only include an overall summary of the changes in the first 80 characters. And then you may want to use additional, for example, markdown syntax on 2 new lines under that to create a list of what you've changed and why. So I've added a changes directory and haven't removed anything. Created a hello world R file from within changes. And so on and so forth, so you can include as much detail as you honestly want. Actually not totally sure if RStudio will follow this, but it should, so let's find out. Click commit, and as you can see, it's done the core terminal command for us behind the scenes over here. Of course, you can use git commit -m, but we will cover that later. And now that git has been, or that commit has been made, we can see that my local branch is ahead of the remote branch get2 by 1 commit. And at this point, we may want to push. Before we continue, I would like to say and mention what's going on in this syntax up here. If you only have 1 remote listed on your local copy, you can largely omit this. Because Git knows what branch you're already in, you can sometimes just type in git push. What this does is we're saying git push to remote named origin in our copy, and we want to specifically commit everything that is currently at the very top of the ledger, the most recent changes for all commits inside of a branch. And normally it's git push origin branch, or git push remote branch name. is a simpler way to accomplish that, but we can cover that later. Ta-da! And now we can see that our remote repository here, named origin, that we have named origin locally, has moved from this commit SHA-SUM to this commit SHA-SUM, or it's gone from our current head, or our current head has been sent to the remote's version of the branch git toot. Now from there, we don't need this window open anymore. And now from there, we should talk about some of the other terminal commands that are available to us via git log, git status, and so on. Although, like we were saying earlier, here's the history button, so you can view the full history of every single commit that's been made inside of the branch we're currently in. We can also switch over to other branches. Here's a branch that I've been working on for a while that was recently merged into master, and so on and so forth. And we may want to filter by a specific SHA-SUM to look for a particular commit. And we may get that information via git log, which is the corresponding terminal command for some of this history, or git blame, which tells you who changed what line of a file. We can also revert changes, but we will definitely talk about that later. And we can also just open the shell to do most of our terminal commands in. So let's have a look at this diff tool. And we're checking out a branch named add_merge_utils, which is a named branch for a feature that was developed. And in particular, down in mixtures, utilities, here and here, let's say that I made some changes here. Is it happy with me? Why is it not happy with me? Yeah, that would be problematic. Okay, so what we can do now is take a look here and diff this file, which will tell us more or less what has changed between our current local version and what's contained remotely, or what's being tracked. Maybe I want 25 lines of context around it so I really know what's going on, and so on. I can choose to stage all, and it just takes all the changes from here and stages it for a commit. In fact, while we're here, here's a look at some of the changes that were made, and we can kind of see the tracking of how many different branches were all going on at once from multiple contributors. Of course, in the terminal, there's a way to view the diff of a file between two different commits, but we will not go into that now. And while we're here, I just realized that there's a mistake in this code, so we're going to actually go ahead and commit this. Okay, I wanted to make sure that there are commas at the end of those function arguments. And I'm not sure if this follows the 80 character rule. I don't typically work in RStudio, and sometimes I'll have a little ruler that pops up. Okay, so let's commit that. Let's close that. Let's push that. And I should also say you can edit your Git settings to always use an SSH key if you've added that to GitHub to kind of get rid of, or you can also change Git to save your login credentials for GitHub in a particular repository to make sure that you don't have to keep on retyping in that password every single time. But that's something you can ask about later. Okay, so that pretty much covers the buttons inside of RStudio for the most of the basics of everything that you'll ever need to know as far as Git is concerned. And for the next video, we'll do more or less the same, but we're just going to do it all in the terminal, and it'll be awesome. All right. Thanks very much, and I will catch you guys in a moment.